Imagine you've been fighting for decades to gain land, and you've made some strong enemies. They've managed to gain ground on you, and this time you're fighting to regain your homeland. As you hide in the mountains, you realize that your knowledge of plants can give you an advantage. Instead of running straight into a fight, you gather honey. Lots of it. And you leave it for your pursuers to find. Sounds nice, right? It might sound like you're being a nice guy, maybe even extending a hand of friendship. But in this story, you are King Mithridates VI of Pontus, and you are laying a trap for the Roman soldiers on your trail. Because what you are leaving for them is mad honey, made from nectar of a rhododendron. You're listening to Plant Connection. Life today can feel overwhelming, like we've drifted away from its natural rhythm. This podcast is your space to slow down, breathe, and rediscover the peace and clarity that come from reconnecting with the natural world. I'm your host, Lisa Cutshaw. Let's reconnect, one plant at a time. In particular, this mad honey was made with Rhododendron ponticum, native to Mithridates' kingdom in what is now Turkey. And it worked. The Romans ate the honey, and within hours they were suffering from symptoms like hallucinations, nausea, dizziness, and fainting. But their day got even worse, because Mithridates took the opportunity to attack and wipe out the Romans. It was a successful tactic, but this was an example of winning the battle but losing the war. The Roman general Pompey was a different kind of mad about the whole thing. He defeated Mithridates in 66 BC, leaving the defeated king to flee to the Crimea. I think I should pause here and say that mad honey is not common, at least not in the US. We have lots of native rhododendrons, but honeybees don't tend to feed on them if there are flowers to choose from, and there are many. In fact, in these parts anyway, small pollinators like honeybees don't tend to be a big part of rhododendron pollination. It's the bigger pollinators like bumblebees and butterflies, and even hummingbirds, that do most of the work. That said, you wouldn't want to go around eating bits of a rhododendron plant. They are toxic, and even burning the wood of a rhododendron can transfer toxic compounds to food cooked over the fire, as many campers have found out the hard way. The toxins aren't only a problem for people. Dogs, cats, and farm animals are all susceptible. I know I make an effort to clear rhododendron seedlings from the pasture to protect my goats. One animal does seem to be immune, though. Deer have an enzyme in their stomach that allows them to eat rhododendrons without getting sick. One cool thing, if you do find that you've ingested rhododendron somehow, maybe by roasting marshmallows over a rhododendron wood campfire, there is something that can help. It's tea. Yep, the same black tea I talked about in last episode, as if you needed another reason to keep it around, right? So let's shift to a type of rhododendron that lives around where I live, and there are lots of them. There are more than 1,000 species of rhododendron in the world, and about 10 of them are native to the southern Appalachian Mountains. Some species are more common than others, but as a group, they are easy to find growing wild, and the big, bold flowers are a familiar sight in mid to late spring. One species that is especially beloved around here is Rhododendron calendulaceum, better known as flame azalea. They have clusters of trumpet-shaped flowers that can range from yellow to dark orange, and people come from miles around to see the show. At lower elevations, flame azaleas flower in April and May, but at higher elevations, they generally flower in June, and that's the show most people come for. If you want to see flame azaleas in all their glory, Roan Mountain is an excellent place for that. It forms part of the state line between North Carolina and Tennessee, east of Irwin, and there are 2 rhododendron festivals held on different parts of Roan Mountain. The North Carolina Rhododendron Festival is held in Bakersville, North Carolina, and the Roan Mountain Rhododendron Festival is held at Roan Mountain State Park in Tennessee. As well as the flame azaleas, you'll also see the purples and pinks of Rhododendron catabiensis, which is arguably even more common. So the reason the display is so amazing on Roan Mountain is because of an ecological rarity called a heath bald. A bald is a mountaintop or ridge top that has no trees on it. A grassy bald is predominantly grassland, and a heath bald is covered by heath plants, like rhododendron. To a lot of people, this may not sound rare. Lots of mountaintops don't have trees, right? But not in the southern Appalachians. This area has some of the greatest biodiversity in the lower 48 states, and plants grow fast here. When an area is disturbed, succession happens fast. There will usually be young trees within a few years, but not on balds. The highest mountain east of the Mississippi is in this area. Hello, Mount Mitchell. But even that mountaintop is less than 7,000 feet above sea level. That's not high enough to be above the natural limit of trees to grow. So I won't go too deep on that, but the current theory is that the balds exist because of how the Native Americans managed the landscape. It's often suggested that the balds were areas where cattle were grazed. I don't know if that's what created them, but I do know that the balds provide an astounding opportunity to experience awe in nature. And I'm not the only one. Roan Mountain has been a beloved destination for outings for generations. Locals and visitors alike have enjoyed picnicking and hiking on Roan's slopes. In the 19th century, the Cloudland Hotel provided a destination for naturalists like John Muir. Starting in the early 1900s, a single-gauge railroad would take passengers and freight through the mountains. It was nicknamed Tweetsie Railroad by the locals, and after it ceased commercial operation in the 1950s, the original train was eventually used in a tourist attraction called Tweetsie Railroad that can still be visited today. So there are lots of ways to see rhododendrons in the wild around here, but what about elsewhere? Most rhododendron species actually grow in the Himalayan mountains. Chinese poets have been celebrating their beauty for more than 1,000 years. Rhododendron were of great interest to Western gardeners back in the day, and several plant hunters braved the dangers of the jungles and mountains to bring back specimens for growers in botanic gardens. In 1881, Edward Manet included rhododendrons in his painting entitled Spring, and interestingly, it's the only flower that's genus is clearly identifiable in the background of the painting. Its main focus is a portrait of a young actress named Jeanne de Marcy as a personification of the season. And by the 1930s, rhododendron was such an easily recognizable part of Western gardens, Daphne du Maurier used it to illustrate the emotional state of the narrator in the opening of her novel, Rebecca. In the famous dream that begins the story, the gardens of the narrator's marital home have begun overgrown, with the rhododendrons now reaching 50 feet tall. This wild, untamed link to the title character seems foreign to the narrator. I do love that book, and I don't want to give any spoilers if anyone hasn't read it yet, so I'll just offer that we have no need to fear the untamed nature of rhododendron in real life. If you prefer a smaller shrub for your garden, there are hundreds of nursery varieties available. At your local nursery, you should be able to find at least a handful of options, though they will tend to be drawn from a narrow range of varieties that have started to take over the trade. If you really want to be spoiled for choice, there are specialty growers who still carry a wider range of options, and the range is wide. You can find varieties that are low growers that can act as ground cover shrubs, varieties that stay in the 3 to 5 foot height range that will fit in most gardens, and then the larger ones that will grow 10 feet tall or more. Most varieties that are commonly called rhododendrons among gardeners will flower for a few weeks in the spring, and for the rest of the year, they'll be evergreen shrubs with large, glossy green leaves. They're great for providing structure and body to a shady part of the garden. If, however, you want what is commonly called an azalea among gardeners, things get a little more varied. Azaleas are a subset of the rhododendron genus, and they're part of what taxonomists consider 2 of the subgenera of the rhododendron genus. So azaleas can be evergreen or deciduous, depending on which species you're looking at. The shrubs tend to be smaller than many rhododendrons, and they tend to have smaller leaves. On a slightly more technical note, they usually have fewer stamens than other rhododendrons. Several varieties have been bred to have a longer bloom season than the wild species, so those can be good options if you want a high-impact plant for a long time in the garden. Just make sure you have well-drained, acidic soil and afternoon shade. There's so much to love about rhododendrons, and they create a canopy for one of my favorite local woodland walks. Who knows? Maybe I'll see you out there. Thank you for joining me on this journey back to nature with Plant Connection. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to tap subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss the next episode. See you next time.